Hey everybody, Eric here. I'm excited to announce that we have just launched our online paranormal merchandise store over at unseenparanormaltees.com. That is unseenparanormaltees.com. And we have designs of shirts for all ages and sizes. And we have a little bit for everybody over there. Right now, we have a line of t-shirt designs and of can koozies. We will be expanding the products that we offer in the near future, and we want to become your one-stop shop for all things paranormal. And for a limited time, using the code PARANORMAL, you will get 10% off orders over $25, and we always offer free shipping on orders over $50 in the continental United States. So head on over to unseenparanormaltees.com. That's unseenparanormaltees.com. And we thank you for listening to the show. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to another episode of The Unseen Paranormal, where some of the scariest things are unseen. I'm your host, Eric Freeman. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Unseen Paranormal. Today we are chatting with paranormal investigator and best-selling author Joni Mayhan. Joni is a seasoned investigator who has attended over 300 paranormal investigations and has written 20 books on the paranormal and hauntings. She also operates Haunted New Harmony ghost walks and investigations in the town of New Harmony, Indiana. Today we're going to talk about some of her experiences and some of the locations she has written about. You can find her books on Amazon, Kindle, and her website, jonimayhan.com. Hey, Joni, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is a pleasure.
No problem, no problem. So you, like I said, you've attended over 300 paranormal investigations and written 20 books on the paranormal and hauntings. So how did you get into the paranormal and to even want to go on that many investigations or write that many books?
23 books.
Oh, I'm sorry. Over 20 books now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, really, the paranormal found me. I didn't have much of a choice in the matter. I was born a sensitive, and it started when I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. I had my first experience, and we lived in an old log cabin that used to be like a hunting cabin back in the woods, and it was on a lake, and it was beautiful. But every time my mother would tuck me into bed, I would start to see the shadows move in the room. And I would get that sense that something was there watching me, and my ears would ring. And I just had paranormal encounters pretty much my whole childhood. I always had funny feelings about some places. Some places made me feel uncomfortable. And I didn't really understand what it was until probably I was a teenager. And then I started really tapping into it just a little bit. I had some experiences at my dad's house when I was a teenager, and it was a house he had built on land that we don't think anybody had ever been on, but it had a pretty nasty ghost in it. And it would taunt me throughout my childhood and my teenage years. But it really wasn't until I was in my 40s that I was able to overcome my fear of it, because for a long time it just scared me. This concept of ghosts following me and being there wasn't something I was keen on. And I lived in a haunted house for 11 years. And that was terrifying because at that point, not a lot was going on in the paranormal community. There really wasn't a paranormal community, and there really wasn't much information out there. So you go to the other resource that you have, or the only resource that you have, and that's to what you've seen on movies and TV.
Right.
And so I was really scared. So when I was about in my 40s, I got a divorce and was free to really pursue whatever I wanted to. And I joined the paranormal team, and I really started tapping into my abilities. There was a psychic medium in the group, and I also become friends with another woman who was also starting to come into her own abilities. And we were able to use each other as validation. And that was when I learned that I'm clairaudient. I hear a tone similar to ear ringing. And once I started working with it, it became a gateway for me. So the ear ringing is the beginning, and if I tap into it, I will be able to get more information, and all the way up to what they look like. I'll get a mind picture of them, what they want, just some basic information. So that's kind of where I am now, and it started with at age 4.
That's interesting that you talk about the ear ringing. I had not heard that until recently, and I've always been an empath, and just in the past 5-6 years I've really kind of embraced it. And so when I go on paranormal investigations, I've always noticed that I get a ringing in my ears. And I had another guest that I talked to that said something about it, and I was like, well, that makes sense. It just seems like the more I talk to people, the more I found out about my own abilities, which is pretty cool.
Well, that's good. Yeah. For me, when I say ear ringing, I'm just kind of generalizing, but for me, most of the time, it's more like white noise. It's a staticky kind of sound. Sometimes it'll have a ring mixed in with the sound, but I can always tell where the ghost is by where the sound is coming from. So if I'm on an investigation with people, they know if they see me moving my head, that means I'm trying to figure out where the ghost is in order to place the equipment. So it does come in handy sometimes.
Yeah. I found that I get it, and it's like a high-pitched whine. It's not necessarily ear ringing like tinnitus or anything, but
right.
Yeah, I find when the energy like is thick in the air, I really get it. And I haven't explored tapping into that, but yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to dive into trying to tune in when I do have that happen.
Yeah, it's all about trusting your instincts, because a lot of people will disregard it. They'll think it's just my imagination, but you really go with what you feel first. And I work with people a lot that are sensitives coming into their abilities, and we'll be in a haunted place together, and I'll feel a ghost come in, and I'll say, do you feel that? And if they say yes, I'll say male or female. And, and then we'll just go through old or young, angry or happy, or sad. And, really kind of helps having that validation, especially if you're both picking up on exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I haven't ever had it. I've investigated quite a bit, but I haven't ever worked with somebody with strong abilities that were kind of more developed than mine.
Yeah, I think, if you're wanting to make your abilities better, working with somebody else is very validating, because you're able to push aside those feelings of maybe this isn't something, maybe it's just my imagination. So it gives you a chance to really empower yourself and believe in your abilities.
Yeah. And with you doing over 300 investigations, what's kind of some of the things that have stood out to you as far as some of the more dominant experiences that you've had?
It's funny because I've been thinking about this lately. It seems like every location that's highly haunted has a couple of things. They have a grumpy man. Usually he's always in the basement. If it's a really old haunted place, a lot of times they'll have a woman in white that's been seen there. And it seems like children get trapped a lot. But for me, what ends up following me home, because one of my books is Ghost Magnet, and what ends up following me home are pretty much women. And it's just interesting to me. They're always looking for help. Sometimes they have more malicious intent, but most of the time they're just looking for something to help them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah. And 300 investigations, they kind of all blend in after a while. But,
right.
I just had a public investigation. I also run public events here in New Harmony, Indiana, where I live. And we just had one 2 weekends ago at an old community house, which was built in like circa 1820. And we've had so many experiences there. It's not even funny. You would think ghosts from that time era wouldn't be keen on answering on our spirit boxes and giving us EVPs and our digital recorders, but they're very chatty, and they come right across and talk right to us. But one night we were having a hard time getting them to communicate, so we pulled out a pinwheel, and we put the pinwheel, just a dollar store pinwheel. We cut a hole in the top of a red cup, put it on the floor, put the pinwheel in there, and it worked. We were saying, spin the wheel if the answer is yes. And over about a 20-minute conversation, we learned that we were talking to a little boy, and he had a leg injury that ended up causing his death, and that he had lived there back in the 1800s. Well, New Harmony is so well recorded and historically that we were able to go through the records and learn that there was indeed a little boy who lived there in that building during the 1800s who died after he lost his leg in a freak cannon accident. So there's a lot of tools. People go out and spend thousands of dollars on paranormal equipment, and we went to the Dollar Tree and got a dollar pinwheel, right. And we got some really interesting information from him, and he pops into some of our conversations even to this day. So it's fascinating, the whole process.
Yeah, and I love how whenever you can correlate evidence that you got and go back and correlate it to somebody that actually, existed there that you can prove was there, that's always pretty awesome.
Yeah, and most of the time that's not the case. Most of
Right.
the time you'll find somebody. I get ghost pops through from other people, like even if it's somebody I know and we're on the phone talking, if they have a ghost there, it finds that ethereal cord that connects me with that person and finds its way to me. And I find that really fascinating because I don't have to go there. I don't have to be in that person's presence in order to pick up whatever they have hanging around them. But it came with me, and I noticed right after I got off the phone, my ears were ringing, and it's a specific tone. Like each ghost has its own tone, so I'm able to really differentiate between them. And later that week, I was around another friend who's also a medium. And when I got home, I thought, wow, I don't hear that tone. That ghost must have, we had gone, it was when we went to that investigation. And I thought, well, maybe, it decided to stay at that building. But sometimes they become ghost hotels. They start collecting more and more ghosts. And then the next day, my friend called me and she said, yeah, I picked up something from the investigation last night. I said, well, how do you describe it? She said, he's a tall, older man with white hair. He's kind of stooped over and he's looking for help. So it was really funny to me because that's exactly how my friend that I got this from originally described this person. And then my friend Sandy McLeod, who is the one that she's been in a lot of my books because she was right by my side through a lot of my really scary encounters. But she's the one that we worked together to validate our abilities. And I said, so I think I have a ghost in my house. I want you to, can you pick out anything about this ghost? And I didn't even say male or female. I didn't tell her anything. And she said, yeah, he's a tall, older man with white hair. He's kind of stooped over and he wants something. And so all three of them came up with the same description of him, which was what I was seeing as well. And I work with a shaman, Michael Robichaud, out of Virginia, and I wrote a book about him called Ruinous Souls. He's understated. I mean, he's amazing. He's removed so many things from me. He sends his spirit guides in. And in this case, he also astral projects. And he came to me that night and helped the man cross over. And I said, what did he want? He said he wanted to be blessed before he went to heaven. He said, so I did a ritual for him that would remove all of his sin, and then he was gone. So it was like 4 confirmations out of one experience. So not sure who he was or where he came from. So there's no way for us to go back and say, oh, none of us got a name or anything. And that doesn't sound familiar to any of us. But,
Right.
Who knows where he started at before he finally found the help that he needed.
Yeah. And that's pretty amazing that you could offer that help and help him move on, and or find the right person to help him move on, and just something as simple as that, of just wanting the blessing because he thought for whatever reason he wasn't worthy to move on to the other side.
Right, exactly, and we find that a lot in hauntings. I think a lot of suicide victims stay earthbound because they think they've committed a mortal sin and they're not allowed in heaven. Sometimes we've crossed them over ourselves just by talking to them and doing kind of like ghost counseling them like they would be a living person, which basically in my mind, they're just a person without a body. And
Right.
I talk to them like I would talk to a friend and tell them, God loves you. You're allowed in heaven. You don't need to be here. You don't need to stay. And we try to open up a white light, provide pathway for them, and we've crossed over a lot over the years, and that's very rewarding when I'm able to do it myself. But if they don't want to go and they're resistant, they have something they feel like they need to do before they go, I can't make them go, and if they don't want to cross over, I can't get them to cross.
Yeah, just that old unfinished business type deal with spirits.
Exactly. And it happens a lot. People aren't ready. They don't feel like they've done what they needed to do. They can't leave things undone, and they won't cross over.
Have you ever come across anybody that didn't know they were dead?
Sometimes it feels like, I think we probably have, but we've come across a few that were not in a good state. and perhaps when they died, there was some kind of brain injury, and they're still in that death state. So we've gotten that quite a few times. So yeah, probably. And I hate to always be the bearer of bad news, but
Right.
I will let them know and try to help them cross over, because sometimes they're just confused.
Yeah.
They don't know why they are where they are. They just remember certain things, and they find themselves in a dark place that they can't explain. So yeah, we try to help them.
Yeah, and I asked that because I've always found that when you're doing EVP session or doing any kind of call and response, and you're getting intelligent responses back, anytime you ask anything about how'd you die or anything about death, a lot of times it just shuts it down. They'll just stop
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing. And it always made me wonder, do they just not realize they're dead, or is that just they're not allowed to tell us type deal?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about their death, that it's maybe the worst thing that's happened to them. Obviously,
Right.
it was the worst thing that happened to them, and they don't want to be reminded of it. They want to talk about their families and their hobbies and what they did and the fun things. So when I have public times, I always tell them there's two things I don't want you to ask today. And one is to ask them how they died or talk about their death at all. And the other is don't ask them if they want us to leave. Because if they say yes, guess what? Investigation's over, because we're not going to be jerks and
Right.
stay there if they tell us they want us to go. So yeah, I don't like to ask about their death too much. I want to find out about their life.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I want to know what's your story, why are you still here type deal, and not what happened to you. Because a lot of times, I mean, especially with a lot of historical locations, you can kind of correlate, okay, well, I'm talking to this person who lived here, so you kind of know, how they died because of historical record or whatever. So yeah, I'm more interested
Right.
in their life after life type deal.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, do you find sometimes you have a hard time getting their name
Yeah.
when you ask for the name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too, and I'm kind of intrigued by that. If if after they've been dead for so long that they kind of move away from that human experience, maybe they don't even remember after a while, that everything starts to fade. I don't know. What are your theories on that?
The best responses I've ever got for names were more recent passings, like in the
Right.
past 30, 40 years. Anything older than that, yeah, it's most of the time, if it is a name, it'll be a very short, like, first name, and that'll be all.
Right. Yep. You can't get the last name.
Yeah.
I know. And I went through a phase where I would ask them if they'd been to heaven, or what heaven, or just what heaven looks like. And kind of knowing that they probably haven't been if they're still earthbound. And I only got it answered once, and it was at a really old farmhouse in Massachusetts that had never been investigated before. And we were up like in an attic room, and a woman's voice came through, and she said, "It's beautiful." But, you have to wonder, if she's seen heaven, then how is she here?
Right.
So maybe that's what, she wants to believe. But yeah, that was the only time I've ever gotten that question answered.
Yeah, I believe in visitation too, because I think I've had some of my own loved ones, come back and visit me in dreams,
Yeah.
or like my mother passed away in 2009, and I've smelled her perfume in our house. Yeah, I think that's why, you don't hardly get an answer, because I think a lot of them are still stuck, and stuck because of their own reasons, or stuck because of other reasons we don't understand.
Yeah, I guess I should have differentiated between how I see the afterlife. I see ghosts, or people that didn't cross over and go to heaven, and spirit I see as people who did cross over, loved ones, and they come back to visit. And I actually wrote a book called Signs of Spirit. So when loved ones visit, and those signs are always so much softer. They come through in symbolism. They come through in numbers. They come through in songs or thoughts or feathers, pennies, yeah, the cardinals. But, I always caution people, if you think your loved one's coming as robins and it's March,
Right.
that's when you're going to see robins. So it's probably not a sign. But if it comes to you in a time that's unexpected, and your first thought is of that loved one, then, it probably is. But I think dreams are the biggest one. So many people will have visitation dreams. And I actually had a visitation dream when my grandmother died.
Yeah, I've had a few from a few of my family members who have passed away, and I've had people ask me why they haven't had one of their loved one. And
Yeah,
my explanation and my thinking, I think it's because they will come to you when they think that you're ready for it.
that's what I think too. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think, you know, if you're still in the grieving process and I think they feel like they know that you're not ready, that if they come through, it's just going to cause them to stick around or, you know, cause you to have a harder time with the grieving process. They're not going to come to you.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing how much we think we know about it from you know the communication and investigating, and how there's so much more that we don't know about it.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so intrigued by the whole paranormal world because we don't know. Everything is speculation, and everybody has, you know, some people have similar experiences, but so many of us have different experiences that leads us to different beliefs about what is really going on. So, you know, I'll tell you, you know, here's my opinion of what I think, but
Right.
as far as what really is going on, none of us know. We won't know until we die.
Yeah, one of my rants about the paranormal world that drives me insane is when you see people on TV and they claim that they're a paranormal expert, or the TV show
Yeah.
claims that, and I'm like, you can't be an expert in something that you can't prove.
You know, I've had that happen to me before. They put up my, you know, my picture and below it says paranormal expert. And a lot of times they don't ask you ahead of time.
Right.
Or one radio show I was on identified me afterwards. They put together the opening, so I wasn't able to even clarify. They called me a psychic medium, and I am not a psychic medium. I'm a medium. I don't pull information about what's going to happen in the future. I don't pull psychic information like that. I talk to the dead, which makes me just clearly a medium. And when they say that, all of a sudden I start getting inbox messages. Oh, can you give me a reading? And I'm like, no, I don't do that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So sometimes you don't have control over it. And it drives me crazy too. And I kind of feel for everybody that's had that title put below their picture because chances are they didn't want it there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there are a few out there that I know of that have given themselves that title. So
Yeah, well, that is true.
yeah,
You are accurate.
but
Yeah.
it's I tell people also, it's just like any other business or like any other job field you work in. There's always people that don't necessarily belong, or you know, are a bit overzealous about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and, you know, I think the reason people's intentions for investigating is really important.
Right.
I've done a lot of locations where people have come in and made things worse because really the only thing they are there for is evidence. Something, a good EVP or a picture, something that they can show to their friends and, you know, talk about what a great investigator they are. They don't care about the fact that they're leaving behind mass chaos and they're confusing the ghosts. You know, so I think, you know, for me, I get into it because one, I'm curious about life after death. What is the process? Why are some people still here and others go through?
Right.
And also about the history, their lives, and how they lived and what, you know, what led them to be still here. You know, it's almost like an archaeology dig, you know, trying to learn more about the past, and who better to ask than the people that lived it. So, you know, those are my intentions. And I, you know, through the course of the process, I have collected a lot of really great Class A EVPs, but that's not my intention. And it's also not my intention to convince skeptics about the validity of ghosts.
Right.
If you don't believe, I don't care. Just don't get in my face and tell me that I'm wrong. You know, I'll respect your opinion as long as you respect mine.
Yeah, I was just in his episode. It will come out in a couple weeks, but I was talking to a friend of yours the other day, Gare, and
Yeah.
Gare Allen, and we were talking about that, about the importance of the history and learning the history and that type stuff, but also that, you know, my experiences are what proves to me that the paranormal is real, and if you're a skeptic, you just haven't had those experiences to prove to you.
Right, right. And you're not meant to. Some people are just not meant to have an experience, or, you know, perhaps they're just wired differently. I don't really know why some people are chosen and others aren't, but I'm okay with it. The fact that there's a division.
Yeah. And a lot of, through talking to people on here and a lot of my research over the years, I've seen that I think a lot of people are taught out of it when they're a kid. And
Yeah,
kids are so
definitely.
open, but if you grow up in a household where your parents just tell you it's your imagination, and your parents don't want anything to do with it because they're afraid of it or they don't believe in it or whatever, I think you can be taught out of a lot of it. And so instead of embracing the paranormal and like we do, a lot of us do, and kind of dive into it, they just kind of push it off or explain it away and don't want anything to do with
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. They'll have until they've had some kind of really profound experience that they can't rationalize. They're gonna try to push it away because reality is scary. You know,
Yeah.
the fact that there's an invisible person in your house watching everything you do is pretty terrifying for most people. I mean, for me, it's just like another Wednesday, but
Right.
for some people, just the thought is just mind blowing, and they don't want to acknowledge that. And that actually, is not a bad way to be because then you're not dealing with all the scary stuff. Sometimes it is scary.
Yeah. And one of the questions I'm sure you get a lot is the whole demon question. And it's probably
Mm-hmm.
the biggest question that I get. And I've been investigating and researching for 25 years, and I've never come across anything that I would classify as demonic. You have nasty people in life, you're going to have nasty people in death. I've said that many times here on the show. What are your thoughts on the whole demon thing and how prevalent it is right now?
I do believe that there are demons out there. I have come in contact with a couple. And for me, they feel different. My ears don't ring. It just feels oily. It's hard to explain, but I get this like disgusted feel, like I'm in the presence of something really horrible, really disgusting. But I feel like the paranormal shows weren't able to scare us anymore with the concept of ghosts. So
Right.
they moved on to demons because what's more scarier than a ghost? A demon.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they've convinced the world, or some people in the world, that demons are around every corner. And I really don't buy into that. I don't feel like they're going to just pop out at every investigation and show themselves. And, it goes along with your belief system that people that are highly religious a lot of times believe in angels or demons. There's nothing in between. And some people just firmly believe in demons, that anything nasty or negative has to be a demon if it's where you come from, what you've experienced. I've heard people say, well, if it's able to move things, a ghost can't do that, only a demon can do that. And I'm like, au contraire. Ghosts, ghosts are quite capable of moving things. So, and it goes back to, do we really know? We
Right.
really don't know. But I think it's just funny because I had, if you asked me what my scariest experience was, I would tell you that it was when we were in Gettysburg, probably about 5 years ago. And I had used to teach a Paranormal 101 class in Gardner, Massachusetts. And I was getting ready to move from Massachusetts to Indiana. And we decided as a group we were going to have we were going to have a trip together to kind of finalize everything that we've done. And so we went to Gettysburg. We rented a couple of cabins in a campground, and we would go out into the battlefields during the day and really just, enjoy the history and learn more. But at night we would go out and we would investigate. But we ended up doing a lot of crossing over. We kept finding a lot of lost souls, and the group that I was with, there were a lot of really powerful mediums and psychic mediums. So we were quite the dream team as far as crossing over. We were crossing a lot of them over. And on one of the last nights, we went back to our cabins. One of the cabins started experiencing something racing around the outside of the building, scraping against the outside of the cabin and banging on the windows. And it just terrified them. And the next morning, we talked about it, but we still weren't sure what it was. And then the following night, we were inside the cabin and we were just sitting around the table talking and trying to play a game. And all of a sudden the hair on the back of my neck went up and everybody else's. It's like something's out there, and my ears started ringing. I'm like, this is not good. And so we started kind of tuning into it. One thing that we have always done is, instead of somebody saying, oh, it's a woman in the corner and she's wearing a hat, because then that's all everybody else is going to see, we'll take paper and pencil and we'll write down what we're feeling and what we're seeing. And there were 4 of us at that table. All 4 of us wrote down exactly the same thing. We said, a tall, thin, African-American man. He had very, very white teeth, and his eyes were big and bloodshot, and he had a top hat. And I mean, I even saw his bolero tie and his white shirt and his black trench coat, and he was carrying a silver-tipped cane. And every single one of us had 90% of those details written down. I mean, we were just all completely in line with each other on what we saw psychically or mediumly. I don't even know how to say that. But anyway, so one of the members of our group said he had some Palo Santos in his car, and he was going to go out and get it, and he was just going to do a cleansing of the cabin and then we were going to try to build a spiritual boundary just to keep this out. And he walked outside and he went down the stairs and he started to go to his car. I think he actually went to his car, and as he was coming back, he looked over his shoulder, and that exact image that we saw was standing at the edge of the campground right by all the cars, down to the silver-tipped cane.
Wow.
And he came in and he said, he's out there. The one we saw, he's out there. He said, I saw him. And I really wanted to go to the window. Like, I was to the window getting ready to look out, and Sandy grabbed the back of my neck. She goes, don't you dare. You've had so many problems with attachments. The last thing you need to do is see him. And I still go back. I really wish I would have looked. But I listened to her and I didn't. And we had a really rough night. Things were pounding on the outside of the walls, and we were seeing shadows, and it was just everybody was having horrific nightmares. And the next morning we woke up, and our cabin was the only cabin that didn't have power. Every other cabin in the campground had power, just us. And as we went to leave a little bit later, it was just a sad moment because I was saying goodbye to my friends, and they were all riding together, and I was going to be going off on my own. So it was very symbolic and very sad. And I got probably maybe 2 hours into my trip, and I started hearing that same tone that I had heard at the campground, that same ghost. He was in my back seat. Wow. He was following me. And I started getting images in my head of, like, it was like a movie playing in my mind. He was going to wait till it got dark, and he was going to show himself to me and cause me to have an accident. And I saw myself on the side of the road trying to run away from my car because he was in my back seat, and then him popping up in front of me. There was no escape. And I thought, nobody would know what's going on to me. I tried to call a couple times and the phone would cut out. And finally I did get a call through to my friends in the other car. And we reached out to Michael Robichaud, the shaman, but we were having a hard time getting in touch with him. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, a man named Jose, who's a psychic medium that he'd been my mentor for a little while. He called me and he said, I'm getting a really strange sensation that you're in danger right now. He said, you have something in your back seat that is, I'm picking up that it's a shadow demon, and it's going to wait till it gets dark, and then it's going to show itself to you, and it's going to cause you to have a fatal accident. So I hadn't told him about that. I hadn't told anybody about that, and that's what he picked up.
Wow.
So, I had like a 12-hour drive home from Gettysburg, and it started getting dark. I was terrified. And then all of a sudden I heard the tone of Michael Robichaud's spirit guides come in, and then I was, they saved me, kept me from that happening. But, when I go back and I tell that story, I think about factors like I did hear ear ringing. And with a typical demon, the few that I've encountered, I never hear it. So people are quick to call things demons because they're powerful and they're capable. But I think this was just a very intelligent, very powerful ghost that had been on our side so long that maybe he had picked up a few tricks.
Yeah.
But, I really feel like Michael Robichaud saved my life that night.
Yeah, that is awesome that he picked up on it and called you, and there was no way that he would have even known any of that.
He didn't even know where I was. He didn't
Right.
know I was in Gettysburg, none of that. So, yeah, it was crazy scary. I've never been more scared in my life. I really thought I was going to die that night.
Yeah, and especially seeing it before it happened and kind of expecting it to happen but not knowing what to do about it.
Exactly.
So you wrote, speaking of nasty spirits, you wrote a book called Hanover Haunting, the Deanna Simpson story. And this story's been featured on TV on The Dead Files and My Haunted House and The Animal Planet's The Haunted. And even John Zaffis, the famous John Zaffis, has been there a part of this case. So how did you get involved with the case and write the book about it?
Well, Deanna had originally hired Rosemary Ellen Guiley to write the book. And she had come out and done a few interviews. And then she just kind of fell off. Like Deanna wasn't hearing from her, and their contract date ended. And so Deanna just canceled it at that point. And then we found out that Rosemary actually had cancer and was basically dying because she died shortly afterwards. So Deanna had contacted a mutual friend of ours, a woman named Gina Bankston, and asked her, do you know any writers? Do you know of any authors that could take on this story and do justice to it? And Gina said, absolutely, call Joni Mayhan. So Deanna reached out to me and we talked on the phone. And of course I knew her story. I mean, I feel like if you're involved in the paranormal arena, you'd have to be living under a rock to not know about that haunting.
Yeah.
And I watched it on all those shows that you named off. The Fox News interview where one of the cameraman got scratched on camera, and they actually caught a shadow person moving across the screen during the interview. So, yeah, I immediately said yes. I didn't have to think about that one. It was like, wow, this is a phenomenal story, and I was very excited to write it. But I wanted to meet Deanna. I wanted to see the house. I think, there's always that part of me that I'm always a little bit of a skeptic with everything. Like somebody can show me a picture or tell me something's really haunted. And I mean, I'm going to believe them to a certain degree, but until I experience it myself, I'm not going to really know the depths of the haunting.
Right.
So I had a Paracon in Massachusetts shortly after we talked, and the Hanover, Pennsylvania is almost halfway for me. So I thought, well, I'll just stop there halfway. I'll spend the night at the house, and I'll get a chance to spend some time with Deanna and get a feel for it. So I was braced. I was ready. I had all my paranormal protection in line and walked into that house and was not in there 5 minutes before I had to retreat out to the porch. It was like a moth to a flame. It was like 1,000 moths to a flame. They were all over me instantly. And when they pull energy from me, my body vibrates, so I always know when I'm being drained. And sometimes I can kind of push my energy outwards and stop it, but I was powerless. It was like anything I'd done thinking I was going to be protected was like tissue paper. But as soon as I would walk outside, I could break that hold. And I said, there is no way I'm sleeping in this house, because by morning I may be fully possessed. I don't know, or at least drained.
Yeah.
And so that moment, I sat down with Deanna on the front porch, and I told her, which if you've read the book, you know this part, but I said, Deanna, I will write your book, but my top priority right now is getting you out of this house and getting this haunting gone. And so, I set forth a series of chain of events that did lead to her being able to escape that house. And so I fulfilled my promise to her, and then we went on and wrote the book. So that was quite an experience. I really did not expect to be in my own book. Usually books like that, I'm just the observer. I'm just the narrator. I'm not going to introduce myself, but I was directly involved in that, so I had to come through. It was very strange.
Yeah, and her story kind of starts. She had kind of had a rough life and some rough marriages, and she finally found a good man to marry, and they found this house. And people always think of haunted houses like these old Victorian places, and yeah, a lot of those are haunted, or like Waverly Hills or some of these, big scary looking places. But this house is like a nice little brick house in a neighborhood and little yard, and you wouldn't look at it and
Yeah,
think it's one of the worst haunted places, in that area of the country.
I know. And it, just goes to prove that a house doesn't have to look haunted to be haunted.
Right.
I feel like it was waiting for Deanna, like it was waiting for the perfect victim. And Deanna came to them very vulnerable. And she, like the abuse she had suffered and just her state of mind, she was so balanced on hope. She really wanted things to work with Tom and put, her past behind her and have her happily ever after. And I feel like the house really called to her. Like once it saw how vulnerable and vulnerable she was, and also the fact that she was a sensitive, so they would able to really get to her a little bit better. She was like the perfect candidate for them. Like they had been interviewing people,
Yeah.
because a lot of people looked at the house and the deals would fall through, nothing would go through. But when Deanna looked at it, everything fell into place. Then they got the house, and they just tormented the hell out of that poor woman.
And she actually took pictures and had an apparition show up in a picture before she even moved in.
Yeah, she was walking around taking pictures to show her family, because the house reminded her a lot of the house she grew up in. And in one of the pictures, there was a really evil face looking out through the window. And, her husband was such a skeptic. He convinced her that it was just pareidolia, matrixing, where you're finding faces in things where faces aren't really there.
Right.
And, and I think, that was the safe thing to believe, like I really want this house. So that's what it's going to be. It's just pareidolia. So I feel like she ignored a lot of the signs because she wanted that house so bad.
Yeah. And you can also find, I think you put it in the book, a Google Maps image, like a street view image that has like a weird face in the window.
Yeah, I know. How crazy is that? That you don't even have to go there. You can just Google it and see the things. Yeah, she took a lot of videos. There's videos circulating around where she was getting the door to open on its own. And a couple of different times. She caught a lot of things on her camera. It was crazy. It just how profound it was. And I'm glad that I got to taste a little bit of the energy there, because when she started telling me her stories, they're so outlandish that most people are going to read that and they're going to go, yeah, that never happened, unless they're, a big fan of like Paranormal Witness,
Right.
where couches fly on every episode.
Right.
Normal hauntings, those things don't really happen, or not very often. And so being able to feel it for myself, I believed everything she told me because I felt it, and it didn't surprise me. She had some bad stuff happen.
Yeah. And you're always hearing that animals are, connected, especially cats. And she had a cat that was kind of old when she moved in the house, but the cat really knew what was going on.
Oh, I know. Poor Skittles. That poor cat was just tormented, and she ended up dying because the cat wouldn't come out of the closet, wouldn't eat, and was just deteriorating, because who knows what they were doing to that cat when nobody was around. And, and I know that from personal experience, my cats are always watching things, and it's good validation for me. If I'm hearing ear ringing from that corner and all my cats are staring at that corner too, then I know that I'm on target with where I'm picking it up at.
Right. Yeah. And so I've read the book, so I know the story, but what are some of the things that they put her through?
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot. Yeah.
So many. Yeah, there's a lot. I think for me, one of the scariest ones is actually the prologue of the book. And then when it gets to that point in the book, I repeat the prologue. But, she, it's in the middle of the haunting. She's already just completely worn down, and Tom doesn't believe her. She ended up sleeping downstairs in another bedroom because, one, Tom snored a lot, but also she had had a really bad experience up there. She had been pushed down the stairs. So she started sleeping in the guest room. And one night she woke up and she was in her dream state, was looking down. She was pinned to the ceiling and was looking down at her body on the bed and watched this demon thing come into the room. with glowing red eyes and just as horrific as you can imagine, and came over and sat on the bed next to her. And then all of a sudden she found herself falling and was in her body and was there with her eyes open, looking up at exactly what she had saw. And she knew she wasn't dreaming at that point because she could smell him. She could feel him sit on the bed. She could feel just, it was way too real to be a dream. And he kept leaning over and he said, I can smell you. I can feel you. I can touch you, and you're going to be mine. And she was finally able to break out of that, and then he disappeared. But to be pinned like that so helplessly, in that state,
Right.
was terrifying. And she had several. He came in and pinned her to the bed another time that was just as horrifying. It was just, I think, the unexpected. Things would be fine for weeks, sometimes months. Nothing would happen. The house would have a good feeling. And then all of a sudden something really horrible would pounce on her. And so just not knowing, it's like Chinese water torture, not knowing when the next bad thing's going to happen. And, they give you this sense of complacency that you think, oh, maybe they got bored and left and everything's fine now. And they let you relax. And then they jump on you. So I think that's the most horrifying thing to me, is just not knowing.
Yeah. One of the things that stuck in my head for some reason, I just because it was just a weird experience that she had, but when she first moved to the house, she had gone out to do some gardening, and this old woman with this one-eyed dog just kind of appeared behind her and kind of startled her. And the woman gave her like a eerie warning that, somebody was murdered in the house. And then the old lady just kind of vanished, and she couldn't find out where this old lady had went. And there was nowhere for her than this dog to go that quickly, because the lady looked like she was quite old.
Yeah. That was, I can only imagine how scary that was, and I've been to the house, and the front yard is very wide open. There aren't bushes and trees, and you can, if you're standing at the corner, you can see a good distance down both blocks, or you can see it's like at a corner, so you can see 4 different directions. And there was nowhere for this woman to have gone that quickly. All she did was take off her gardening gloves and put them down and turn back around. So it was like 3 seconds, and the woman was completely gone. That was one of the first things that happened to her, and it was kind of maybe a warning, and I don't know. I never really got a good sense of who that could have been. Definitely connected with the haunting, but the fact that they told her, that a boy was murdered there, that, they were giving her perhaps a warning.
Yeah.
And the ghosts in the house, wouldn't do that because they liked the element of surprise. So I don't know who did that. Maybe there was another ghost that came along and felt bad for her.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that this apparition appeared to her with this one-eyed, mangy-looking dog.
Yeah, 3-legged too. And Deanna's recall on the details was incredible. Like she described the way the woman was dressed. She said she looked like she had on a dress that was handmade with fabric from the Ben Franklin, and she had on a sweater that would look like it was hand knitted, and it was like I think a coral or yellow. She just had so many details that she remembered from that period, and it really gave the book a better texture of reality. Amazing working with Deanna Simpson.
Yeah, and so what did you kind of find out about the history of the house that would have kind of maybe explained the nasty haunting that was there?
Well, John Zaffis wrote the foreword for the book, and he asked me to write the foreword for their new book as well. So I got to write his foreword, which was really cool. But in his foreword, he talked about it being the perfect storm. And I really feel like that was probably pretty accurate, because Hanover's not far from Gettysburg. It's like 16 miles away. And some of the troops did march through Hanover. As we were doing research, we learned that a soldier died right there on the property on the way. And then there were also a lot of land skirmishes back in like the 1700s that I don't remember. I've written too many books since then, but I don't remember the man's name. But he had claimed a lot of this land in that area and he had people that were tenants living on the property, and he was kind of a bully. He was very not a nice guy, and he would tell them they needed to pay him more money, and they couldn't pay him. And his son came out to try to collect money from one of the land tenants, and they got in a fight, and there was a shooting, and one of them died right there near where the spot is. So, and then there's the story about the boy that died in the basement, and that one I couldn't validate that did happen, but Deanna had a lot of people confirm to her that had lived there during that period of time that it did happen. So it was kind of a verbal confirmation, but apparently one of the former owners was not necessarily a great man, and he had an affair while he was living there, and which produced a baby. And the baby had some kind of mental deficit. And the woman took the baby away and raised it somewhere else. But by the time the boy got to be about 13, 14, he was impossible to control. He was very angry, and she was afraid of him. So she brought him back and literally dumped him on his dad's doorstep. So his dad and his dad's wife had to raise this child that was a product of an affair. And the boy would do some really awful things, like he'd catch cats in the neighborhood and burn them alive in a barrel, and just really not a good person. Some of the story gets into things that we can't really validate, but people were talking about the fact that the uncle might have been sexually molesting him. And when the boy was shot, the uncle was there. They listed it as an accidental discharge of a firearm, and that's how he died. And I do think Deanna did actually find that. She did a lot of research prior to me even coming on board. But the uncle was there when it happened, and he immediately went home and shot himself.
Wow.
So I feel like, and there is a portal in the basement. So perhaps it's right where he shot himself. Maybe his death opened up a portal. I don't know. The boy was still there at that point, and it just invited in a lot of other things. It's like one bad thing just opened the floodgates, and everything else came in. Things from the past, things from the future, things from the present. And I feel like Deanna probably brought something in with her as well. So it was just mass chaos. It was a ghost hotel. There were so many layers of hauntings there. They weren't just your random everyday ghosts either. They, a couple of very powerful ghosts, including the former homeowners.
Yeah, it's an incredible story, and I urge my listeners to go read the book, Hanover Haunting, the Deanna Simpson Story. And I love the way that you write also, because you put so much detail in there, and it kind of puts you in the story to where you, in a way, are kind of feeling what she felt in the moment and what she was thinking in the moment, and even down to what the cat is going through.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to write it from the person's point of view that was going through it. So it reads almost like a fiction book, but it's not. It really happened, and that's important to me, that I try to capture how she was feeling in those moments, because that's you can just give a laundry list of all the things that happened in that house, but until you really tap into that pure terror that person's feeling in that moment, you're not really getting the gist of the experience.
Right. Well, we're running out of time here. Everybody just have to go out and read the book and read the rest of the story there. So what else do you have coming up as far as books? I know you still do the Haunted New Harmony tours kind of around the year. And if anybody's up in the like Evansville, Indiana area.
That's right. Yeah, I do ghost walks here. Once it starts getting colder, I take a little bit of a break, but generally I run from March till November. So I have 2 more coming up this next weekend. But currently I'm working on a book called Haunted Posey County. So the History Press caught wind of what I did here. I wrote Haunted New Harmony, which my ghost walk tour is based on that book. And they asked me if I would write a book about the entire county and talk about the different hauntings. So that will be out probably next September. And then I'm going to go back to, I love writing fiction. I have a fictional series that I write, and it's about a woman who is a scout for a paranormal TV show. And so she goes to these locations to figure out what's going on. and where to place the cameras and who to interview, and things happen to her. And she's also sensitive like me, so she encounters a lot of different things. And the first book in that series is called Crazy Dead People. And I wrote the second book and released it a couple months ago called Demon a la Mode. And I would like to get working on the third book as well. So that's what I've got coming up right away.
And they can go check you out on JoniMayhan.com. And I'm sure you're on all the social medias as well, like everybody is nowadays.
That's right. Yeah, I am. I probably use Facebook more than anything, but yeah, JoniMayhan.com or even HauntedNewHarmony.com will get you to the same place if you can't remember how to spell my name. But all my books are on Amazon.com as well, so you can just go on there and type, my name or Hanover Haunting or anything, and it'll lead you to all 23 of my books.
All right, Joni. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'd love to have you back on in the future.
Yeah, I would love to be back on. Thank you.
All right, everybody. As always, stay safe out there. Have a good day. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, head over to the Unseen Paranormal Lounge on Facebook for all the latest updates and discussions about the show. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, or at unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe to help more people discover the show. The Unseen Paranormal Podcast is proud to be the ambassador for paranormal for Verbal.com. A big thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. You can find more of his music on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. And as always, thank you for listening.